Right now, in February 2026, all eyes are on one city, one room where the fate of the Middle East is literally hanging in the balance. We're going to take you inside the incredibly high-stakes nuclear negotiations between the United States and Iran.
And it all boils down to one brutally simple question. Is this whole thing going to end with a historic deal, or is it going to explode into a devastating war?
Picture this, Geneva, Switzerland. The atmosphere there is just thick with tension. You've got negotiators racing against the clock, where a single wrong word could have consequences for the entire world. Everyone is holding their breath.
So let's pull back the curtain. What's actually happening inside these talks? This is diplomacy, all right, but it's happening under the very real shadow of war.
And you can see just how deep the mistrust runs from the get-go. The American and Iranian delegations, they aren't even in the same room. Seriously, they're talking indirectly, with Omani mediators literally carrying messages back and forth between them.
The pressure from the United States couldn't be clearer. President Donald Trump basically laid it out on Air Force One: make a deal or you're going to face the consequences. You know, this isn't some gentle suggestion. It's an open threat, and it's backed by a ton of U.S. naval power sitting right there in the region.
But Iran's response, coming directly from the supreme leader, is just as defiant. It's basically, you can park your warships off our coast, but don't forget, we have weapons that can sink them. It's this intense war of words that's happening while the diplomats are trying to find some kind of peace.
So, you've got to be asking, how on earth did we get to this point? I mean, this crisis didn't just pop up out of nowhere. Let's do a quick rewind of the events that brought everyone to the brink.
It has been a really chaotic year. Just last June, the US and Israel launched military strikes on Iran's nuclear sites. Then, just last month in January, huge anti-government protests exploded across Iran, all thanks to a collapsing economy. And that brings us right here, to these tense talks in Geneva.
Now, if you want to understand the urgency here, you just need to look at this one number: 400 kilograms. That's how much uranium Iran is enriched to 60% purity. And let me tell you, that is just a stone's throw away from being weapons grade. The head of the IAEA warned it's enough material for, and I'm quoting here, maybe a dozen devices. That's terrifying.
At the same time, Iran is getting squeezed hard. Years of crippling sanctions, which the Trump administration ramped up, have just destroyed their economy. We're talking about insane inflation, food shortages, real, widespread hardship for everyday people. And that's what drove them into the streets.
And the regime's response to those protests? Well, it was a brutal, violent crackdown. Tens of thousands of people were arrested. So you see, the Iranian government is feeling the heat from every direction, from the U.S. military on the outside and from its own furious population on the inside.
Okay, so with all that as the backdrop, what does each side actually want to get out of this? Let's break down what they're demanding at the negotiating table.
And when you lay it out like this, the problem just jumps off the page. Look at the three columns. On the nuclear program, Iran says it has a right to enrich, the U.S. wants to curb it, and Israel wants it gone completely. It's the exact same story for sanctions and for ballistic missiles. The gaps aren't just big. On the most important issues, they look totally unbridgeable.
And you can hear this position perfectly in the words of Iran's foreign minister. He's saying, look, we're here to make a fair deal, but what we are absolutely not going to do is surrender just because you're threatening us.
But then you've got Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who's worried about something completely different. He's afraid that a small, limited deal would actually be a huge mistake. He thinks it would give the Iranian government a financial lifeline right when it's at its weakest, basically wasting a golden opportunity to bring the regime down.
So with all these impossible demands and open threats flying around, you'd think these talks were totally doomed, right? Well, amazingly, that's not what happened. A little glimmer of hope actually emerged. The breakthrough came when they agreed on something called guiding principles. Now that sounds like a bunch of diplomatic jargon, so what does it actually mean? It's not the final deal, not even close. Think of it like agreeing on the chapter titles for a book before you start writing the actual pages. It's a roadmap.
And the language coming from the Iranians suddenly sounded, well, a lot more positive. They said the talks were more constructive and that now they're ready to move into a technical phase. That means they're actually going to start working on the text of a potential deal.
So this lays out the path forward. Nice and simple. Step 1, agreeing on the roadmap. That's done. Check. The next step is for both sides to start swapping drafts of an actual agreement, and then they'll get together for a third round of talks. It's a small step, for sure, but it's a real one.
But, and this is a huge but, this story is far, far from over. This whole breakthrough is incredibly fragile. The final chapter hasn't been written yet, and the biggest question is, can this diplomatic path actually survive?
Because even with this new roadmap, the really big, fundamental problems, they haven't gone anywhere. That deep, corrosive mistrust is still there. All those massive disagreements we just talked about, still there.
And these aren't small details either. We're talking about the huge, deal-breaking issues. What happens with uranium enrichment? What about the ballistic missile program that Iran says is non-negotiable? And what about Iran's support for groups like Hezbollah and the Houthis? And then, of course, the million-dollar question. How and when do the sanctions actually get lifted? Any one of these could still blow the whole thing up.
So we end up right back where we started. The negotiators left Geneva with a clearer path to a deal. But the ultimate question is still hanging in the air. In a region with so much bad blood and history, is a path drawn on a map really enough to stop everyone from sliding into war?